So from IT to blue team. So a little bit of disclaimer real quick. For anyone who's followed me of any length of time or has met me, I will introduce dad jokes throughout this conversation. There's a reason for that. Humility and humor goes a long way in our field. We can be seen as stiff, hard to approach, and sometimes just the people who say no to you. So feel free to boo me off the stage. I'll have no problem with that. But at the same time, we're here to learn and to grow from each other. So a little bit about me. I've been in this field since the mid-2000s. I've worked across the regulated utility industry, financials, and now into software development. I hold several GX, as you can see listed on the bottom, as well as my CISSP. So our agenda for this talk, communication as key. You've heard that referenced several times throughout this summit already, and I'm going to continue to push that throughout this talk. I'm going to talk about my journey of how I got from just dabbling in my home to an undergrad degree, into the workforce, back for my grad degree, and then transitioning to a formal cybersecurity role. Why you should change? Is it even pertinent to change? Do you need to give up your IT title? Can you keep your IT title? Just a little bit of information from the workforce, how to stay involved, as Justin mentioned, and then how to pay it forward. And then we'll recap it and we'll go on to our next talk. So with that, my first joke of the day. What should you do if you get locked out of your house? Talk to the lock, because communication is key. So what I mean by that, there you go. So we have to be willing to communicate no matter where we're at and no matter where we're at in our day, both professionally or personally. We work in a multi-generational industry. Some people may want a Slack message. Some people may want you to walk over to their desk when we're on site. Some may want you to pick up the phone and call them. So understanding how to effectively communicate with your peers, your customers, the line of businesses we support, as well as the personal relationships you make both in the workforce and outside of the workforce, make us better practitioners and professionals. So just as we're going through this, let that roll around the back of your mind why communication is key and important in our industry. So my journey, I had the opportunity to do an IT audit stint at a local financial institution, worldwide institution, but local to the Charlotte, North Carolina area during my undergrad. During that time, I realized quickly, audit is intriguing. And I use the word intriguing is because for someone who had always just dabbled, never really seen process, procedure, my eyes were open to what the array of IT infrastructure looks like. During my undergrad, we had a guest lecturer who came in who was running his own side consulting business, and he was looking for students to help augment his IDS work he was doing. So I got to do IDS handling work while into my undergrad degree at Appalachian State. During that time, I got to learn more and more about just a little bit of what the industry could look like, how users interact with our systems, and a little bit more into that. Then I moved into IT service management at the regulated utility. During that time frame, I was new, I was naive, but I was given the opportunity again by someone to go get a certification in my undergrad. I got my IDLE certifications, my Foundation V3 certification. And because of that certification that my instructor at the time sponsored, I got my foot in the door with this large utility doing IT service management. It was a rotational program at that time. So after about 14, 15 months, I moved into web application monitoring for the same utility. During that time frame, I had the pleasure and the opportunity, once again, as a 20-something-year-old, to interact with key stakeholders in our business because we were monitoring their availability. What is the uptime? What is the resilience of your application from a web application monitoring? Then I transitioned into electronic document management. For anyone who knows, document management is not easy. And again, young, opportunities to learn a lot about my business. I got to mind my business, no pun intended, with the utility. But at the same time, I got to learn a lot about what goes into workflow management, documents, as we'll dive more into this, RBACing, proper provisioning of your applications. During that time timeframe, I used my employer reimbursement to go back and get my master's degree. About 3/4 of the way through my master's, I realized I was ready to actually take the leap and leave IT and move back into the cyber industry with a formal cyber title. I started networking with all the senior managers I had met, the mentors that I had inside the utility, and shared my aspirations. During that time frame, we were in the process of building out our SOC at this utility. I was brought in on the system engineering side of that as the SOC engineer. So during that time frame, I'm like, great, I get to hit the ground running. I get to be here when a Fortune 150, 200 company is building out their security operations center. Nice. During that time frame, I got to do anything from endpoint, network monitoring, packet capture, et cetera. And then I recently took on a security operations manager with a backup and recovery company called CrashPlan. But again, as Justin mentioned, and I have at the bottom of this slide, the most important thing that allowed me to move through these jobs and to get where I am today is mentorship. Someone took the time to listen to me, to ask me questions, to push me past just taking a role, sitting in the role and being the best I could at a single role. So think about that as you go back to your workforce. If you're talking to your peers, talk to your management, your directors, et cetera, about what it's like to continue to pour in and be poured into. So what I've learned from those previous roles, I've already alluded to some of it, but in IT audit, I was exposed to how systems work. For anyone who's been in the industry long enough, when people say you work in IT, they immediately assume you can do hardware, software, programming, and tack on whatever you want. During the audit role, I was able to interact with all those disciplines. Even though it was a short stint at the bank, I learned policy, procedure, and technologies. Learning what policy and procedure and technologies look like in an organization led me to understand how I could properly put myself into that mix, how I could be the one helping to detect, respond, prevent, even though that wasn't really the terminology I had learned at that point in my career. But as I think back, I was introduced to that. As I alluded, I had the opportunity to be an IDS handler in undergrad. So what does that mean? I am a undergrad student pursuing an information IT degree, and now I'm being asked to go look at a console and understand, is this a false positive? Is this a false negative? Is this a true positive? And what are we going to do about it? During that time frame, I was exposed to the current threats that were going on, the current vulnerabilities. When I first got to understand what vulnerability management could look like, and the techniques that you use from the blue team or the offensive side, both as a white, black, or gray hat. Also, as we all know, because I was seeing the alerts that were generated, you get to see what users can and will try on your network. Sometimes that's intentional, sometimes that's unintentional. And when you investigate it, you can determine, was it an intentional insider is the new term, or was it an accidental insider? First exposed to that in my IDS handling role. Next, as I alluded, I moved into IT service management. This was probably a pivotal point in my career. Again, I just graduated from college, joined a regulated utility, and within my first 3 months, I'm running our CAB board, our change advisory board. Inside that CAB board, I have my CIO, all of his direct reports, and most of the senior leadership senior managers sitting in that room around a table, listening to me run a change report. I'm 21, 22 years old at this time. I'm at a Fortune 150 company, and now I have exposure and I have their attention. They're listening to me speak. What do you do with that? How do you handle that? I'm like, I took the opportunity. I got on first name basis with every single one of them, and I got to learn a little bit about them. So I networked in that role. I got to learn the importance of change control and approvals, why it's important to have a ticket, why it's important to get approvals, why it's important to do an impact analysis. What is the downstream effect of a change? Introduced to CIS controls at the same time. Asset inventory, hardware inventory. Why is it imperative to know what assets you have on your wire, what hardware you have in your data center at this time because we weren't cloud-based? And what does that look like? And why do we care about the downstream effect of making an application change or a hardware replacement or move from a data center? And then problem and lesson learned importance. What do you do after the fact? Again, I'm not in cyber yet. These are all traits that I'm picking up in my IT career that leads me to understand problem, lessons learned, analysis, and the importance. So the after effect, as we would talk about now, the post-mortem. What do you do post-mortem? My web application monitoring, again, visibility into how web apps work. I wasn't a developer. I didn't understand some of this stuff. But as Justin alluded to, I got exposed. Someone gave me the ability to look at their code and to see what the browser's doing. Again, I learned browser configurations. I was naive at that time of what all the browser knew about me, what the browser continues to know about me, how persistent cookies work, how the impact of what a server side and a client side event is. Things that like in undergrad are great. You learn them in theory. I was applying them. I was getting exposure to them. I was able to ask questions and learn when I was monitoring their applications. Electronic document management. It's imperative to have access control. You have to control access to your documents. Again, still haven't learned what data security is, data labeling, data classification. These are terms that has not hit my vernacular yet, but I knew that it was important for that. And I knew that classification of those data was hard. And I had to manage the workflows in the system that I supported. I started as a business analyst on the front end, writing and reworking their GUI to allow the users to search their documents. Quickly realized that I had a little bit deeper technical skills, so started doing data conversion, mapping data from the legacy system to the new system. Then I moved into a system administrator side of that, supporting the legacy system, the corporate system, and at that time, the nuclear system, all three independent with RBAC. How do I give access to these things? What does AD look like? What is a service account? What does an interactive account look like? When do you use a service account? When do you use interactive? Again, I'm not in cyber yet, but I'm being exposed to this principle called identity and access management. At that time, when I decided to go back and get my master's, I was able to take the principles that I was learning in these application teams, these compliance teams, governance teams, and say, this is something I can do. Also, I listed here, this is when I got introduced to what legal hold, e-discovery. If anyone's ever done legal hold and e-discovery, it's messy. It's difficult. You have to retain data. The user's asset has to be monitored. Did they delete something? Did you catch a copy of it? Do you have a copy of it? Can you produce that copy of it? I wasn't in legal, but I talked to the paralegals enough to know that they needed this. They needed this if we got subpoenaed. We had to produce evidence. This led me to start thinking about what now we do as chain of custody for a blue team member. You pulled an asset. Do you understand chain of custody? Can you maintain chain of custody? So if I had to go in front of a court as an expert witness, could I produce the integrity of this to get into our CIA model? Do I have integrity in how I handled this asset as I took it off the web, contained it, or moved it around? At that point, as I said, I started my networking internally and I moved into a cyber systems engineer role. Because I had that system administrator background, because I had been exposed to IAM, because I had IT service management, when I walked in, I knew my environment. That's something that's hard in today's society, as we talked about. We did the Cyber 42 exercise yesterday when we chose some of those things. Knowing your environment, having tribal knowledge in a company, and then putting on a cyber hat made my job a whole lot easier because I understood naming conventions. I understood locations. I understood what this line of business did, how this plant worked. Again, I worked at that company for 13 years. I learned a lot. I knew a lot. But until I moved into cyber, I was naive to what actually goes on in that environment. You see here, I wrote antivirus is. You can fill in what you want. AV was my first intro as supporting a cyber tool. We had one of the big three. I deployed the agent with the help of my workstation. I monitored what was going on. I made sure DAP files were pushed. Quickly realized I had a little more aspiration. So here comes email. Oh, email's a blast. Email's not a blast. Email's the toughest thing you've ever seen in your life. At one point in my career of email, I sat down and looked at the network architecture in which we had, and we scrubbed this email a half a dozen times, if not more, and I still saw 7% of that mail get delivered, and approximately 0.5% of that is malicious. You got to think, you scrub that thing from your firewall to your secure email gateway, your sandboxing technologies I'm about to get to. You have endpoint tools that are now watching that mail when you start interacting with it. Again, why am I talking about that? I once again got to see how business technologies work and how there's a security mindset to each and every single one of them. Sandboxing. I deployed several sandboxing technologies in that role, from a networking sandbox to an email to a malware box. I was the engineer responsible for those solutions, managing those contracts, getting to know, learning the TTPs, learning the IACs that come in and what to do with them as the engineer. And then this thing called cloud. Ooh, cloud. We were a regulated utility. Like, what do we do with cloud? One of my leaders at the top, over my dead body, will we go to cloud? Well, he's not dead, but we went to the cloud. So, but as we just heard in the keynote this morning, it is imperative to understand where your data is, who has access to your data, the IAM. I've mentioned that a couple times. IAM is now your perimeter in the cloud. I got exposed to that and started working with this traditional architecture mindset. Put a firewall in front of it. Can't do that in the cloud. So what do? You dive in deeper. You get certifications. You go to trainings. I did all that. During that same role as when I was introduced to SANS, when I got to meet a lot of the individuals that are in this room, and some of them for the first time in real life, I've met them. I dove in, and I dove in hard. Since 2019, I've got all those GX. I committed to getting knowledge, but at that same time, I've committed to sharing that knowledge. Anyone who will listen to me, from the Uber driver to my dentist, my tax accountant, they're going to hear something about cyber. And why? I believe it. I live it. If you look at my LinkedIn, I call myself a cyber evangelist for that reason. I talk about it. And why is it important to talk about it? Because someone has to. If you don't see something and say something, as we'll talk later in my presentation, no one else is. And they're scared to. And we talked about that yesterday. Don't be afraid to ask the dumb question. Don't be afraid to stick your neck out and defend a decision that you have passion for, that you're comfortable with, and you understand. Now in my current role, employee engagement, morale, everyone in this room can attest that our jobs are tough. Our jobs are long at times. We may have tickets to a concert on Friday night at 5 o'clock, and all of a sudden, your phone rings. You turn to your wife and be like, sorry, honey, I'm staying home tonight. That kills morale. That kills personal relationships. But we believe in what we do. We care about why we protect our companies and our customers. Learning from NIST, learning from MITRE. We've talked about MITRE at least 5 or 6 times so far in the conversations. Why do I care about those? Those research that's being done is moving the needle, as we talked about yesterday in our industry. Understanding what the attack framework, what Navigator looks like, what Defend looks like. You're able to know without a shadow of a doubt that you have coverage. You can map out your EDR. You can map out your other tools and determine, I have coverage here. And then you look at your threat landscape, again, that we've talked about. Is that adequate for the firm that I work for the customers I'm supporting? And then tuning. For anyone who's ever done logging, any worked in a SIM, it's easy to do input driven. Give me everything you got. Just give it in here and then I'll look at it later. Then you can move to the output driven, as we talked about. Well, I only want what I need, only what I think I need. I adapt to the hybrid model. Give me a little bit of both. Give me as much as you can to start with, and let's back off so I get to my model. I learned that tuning is imperative, because if I just continue to throw alerts all day long and put terabytes of logs into my SIM, they're not getting looked at. They're not getting processed. You don't enrich it. You don't get the correlation because you're not doing anything with it. You're not tuning. You're not getting yourself in a position that you can actually move the needle and the maturity model of your company. So why change? We've talked about this a few times. The jobs are there. They estimate that there's almost 3 million cybersecurity professionals globally. 87% of organizations are seeking diversity in their work. And not just, and I'll add a little bit of this, diversity is not just your skin color. It's just not your race. It's your life experiences that you bring. It's the purpose of my talk here. Because I worked in all those different IT roles, I bring diversity to cybersecurity. Because I'm willing to go interview, talk to someone, I bring diversity to cybersecurity, even as a white male. And there's continuing to be growth in the STEM fields. You can see over 13.5% will be in mathematics and computers by 2026. So thinking through that, about 31% growth over the next 10 years since 19 in the InfoSec community, with network architectures also growing at a 5%, but computer programming declining at that same rate of 9%. We have over 1 million employees working in cybersecurity in just the US as of February. 2/3 of those are struggling to define their career path. Again, mentoring, networking, figure out where you want to go in your life. What do you want to do with your career? And talk to someone about it. 40% of our leaderships are struggling to fill their roles. We've talked about that. As a SecOps manager, I post, I compete, I need talent. I struggle to find talent. But at the same time, you're going to see a growth of over 350% from the last 10 years. Because what's happened in the last 10 years? Modern technology. We now hear about events in real time. You're not waiting on the newspaper to print a cyber event. You open up your phone, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, Apple alerts, Android alerts. You know almost instantaneously an event happened anywhere in the globe. I'm not surprised by that growth, and I think it will continue to grow as we continue to evolve, but at the same time, I think we're getting numb. And when I say we're getting numb, is we're no longer surprised by the data leak. We're no longer surprised by the data breach. But that's why we're in this room. That's why we attend summits like this, so that we can go back to our organization and say, I still have hope. I still care. I think we can move the needle. Did you realize, as you've heard me talk, that we're probably already doing cybersecurity if you're in IT? Just some of the top jobs listed over here on the side. Several of them have cyber in their name. But a software developer right now has to do secure CI/CD, has to do secure coding. So when we go out to the market now and say, I want a Python developer, I want a Python developer who knows security. Security first, because the developer's not going to think the mindset unless we teach him to think security first. And we want to shift that left. As we produce apps, as we're coding, shift that to the left as much as possible. Network engineers, systems engineers, they have to understand the complexity of their systems and how to secure them. Your appliances, if you're still running them, have to be hardened. If they're virtual, they have to be available. If they're in the cloud, they have to be secured. So all of these roles here, no matter if you're in IT, in cyber, it's all of our jobs to continue to secure the insecure. That's the purpose of why we have jobs, both in IT and in cyber. So transferable skills, think about this. If you've worked as a help desk analyst, you've had to triage, you've had to process an alert, you've had to do documentation, you've had to do procedures. You've probably even done a form of incident response without the traditional mindset. And scripting. Most of us in this room have scripted in some way, shape, or form, even if it's just to get rid of a monotonous task that we don't want to repeat. And reporting. We've talked about that in a few of our talks today. You want to get to a place in your career where you can be replaced. You want to transfer those skills so that you're not pigeonholed in your career and you can't move on. Because if you are the only person who knows something and you go to a 24/7 operations, you have to sleep at some point, no matter how hard you try. There's a gap at that point. You have to take a vacation, not you will. You have to take a vacation, which is something we fail to do in our industry. We fear of missing out. We get connected. We don't disconnect. So using those transferable skills from your previous roles and educating others is how we, again, move the needle. Soft skills, they're essential. You've heard me already talk about communication and active listening. We have to be able to do written and verbal communication to talk with our peers, our leadership, our stakeholders, our boards, and in some cases, the external entities that we deal with day in and day out. We have to be consistent with our communication to other teams that we're partnering with so that they understand the risk that they're accepting when we open up a port and a firewall, when we allow list an application on their workstation, when we allow them to run a job in the environment that's not authenticated for whatever reason. Risk acceptance, communication, and effectively sharing that with them. Problem solving. We do this every day. Every day in our careers, we think we have to do some sort of problem solving. It could be as simple as, do I click this button? Do I not click this button? What is the ramification of pushing this, not pushing this? I alluded to earlier, the reason I use humor and the reason I have humility is because with humility, you're willing to admit you're wrong and you need help. And you're capable of asking for that help. No matter where you're at in your career, if you are the frontline analyst or if you're the senior manager, CIO, CEO, you've got to have humility to succeed. Using humor allows people to approach you. If you can smile and laugh with your colleagues, the morale again goes up. Again, we get burned out in our careers. We get pigeonholed now that we're remote. We sit in our offices, sometimes with no one else in the room, in the house, for hours. Having a sense of humor and being able to jump on a screen share or a video call and just break bread. Have a moment where it's personal, where you start the meeting getting to know the person, asking them about their kids, asking them about their dog, learning what they've done for the weekend, or they're going to do this weekend, and laughing. Independence. We talk about this all the time. This one gets tricky. We want people to always go work on their own. But what happens when you work on your own? You get idle. You get lost. I don't see you anymore, especially in a virtual environment. If you're not collaborating, it's important to have this skill, but don't lean on purely independence because this is a team industry. We have to work together to continue to move the needle. So why shouldn't you write with a broken pencil? Because it's pointless. I told you, these jokes will be coming and several of them are pointless. So continuing with that, we have to be creative. That joke was not creative, but let's keep going with this. We have to exercise that creativity in how we solve problems. So as we've talked in some of our workshops and we'll continue to work in our workshops, what are we looking at? Are we looking at the data straight on? Are we looking at the data from the left? Are we looking at the data from the right? Are we looking at it from the end user's point of view? Can we be willing to look at it from the end user's point of view and remove our security blinders, for lack of a better phrase, and say, I see why they did this. Bad process, bad procedure, bad governance is why they did this. Be creative with how you investigate and how you interact with your folks. Continually research, dive in, write articles, perform the research, share the research, do a lab, play with the lab. Labs are much, much easier. And if you're looking for resources, SANS has several. There's plenty out there on YouTube on how to just get started with something as simple as a Raspberry Pi. There's something you can do. Research is a key component for all of us as Blue Team members because we need to stay diligent and understand how to detect and protect against all the various attacks that we're seeing today, which means we have to have a continuous learning mindset. We have to be able to have capacity to learn. What does that mean? We have to stop being so focused that we can step back and realize, maybe I shouldn't do it this way anymore. Maybe I can't secure this as I did on-prem. There is not the lift and shift is not a real term because you're right sizing. You're resecuring when you move that asset from your data center into the cloud. And you gain new experiences because you're experiencing new content. No one in here wants to just look at the same signature every day. Look at the same log source every single day. You're not growing. You're not developing if that's all you do is you stay in one niche for your entire career and never move out of it. Continue learning, continue to push yourself and continue to dive into new things. So, how to stay involved. Justin's mentioned it, I've mentioned it. Mentor. Find that junior staff member. Find that next generation. Get into the local high school. Go to the local community college. Set up a talk in your community event center and just put a flyer out. Hey, ask me anything. See who shows up. If you don't know the answer, point them to how to get the answer. Anyone can be a mentor, and I'll dive more into that on the next slides. Share what you're learning. Don't isolate yourself. Get on Twitter, get on LinkedIn, get on Twitch, write a blog, make your own channel. Just do something to continue to share what you're learning. Because it's statistically known that when you write something or teach something, you force yourself to learn something. Because when you're teaching something, you have to make sure that you're more or less an expert. Me standing on this stage doesn't make me an expert, but it gives me some credibility because I'm standing before you. So be willing to share this stuff with people. Last one, give talks. We're here today. Volunteer, put in a proposal. Be willing to stand up and just share with your peers. Even something as simple as soft skills. It's important. Or do a non-tech talk. It doesn't have to always be technical. Like you can give back to the community by giving a non-technical talk as well. So some stats on mentorship, since we're focused on 84% of our Fortune 500 companies have a mentorship program. Of the top 50, all 100% do. 97% have found that value of those who take part in it. But only 37% of us have a mentor. Let that number sit there with you. Of the Fortune 100 companies, all 100%, and of the Fortune 500, 84%. But we don't take part in it. Those who have a mentor go on to mentor others. Mentorship and learning from others is a must. You and your mentor will learn together. That's important. You will drive and push your mentor as much as the mentee. And don't be afraid to ask someone to mentor you, and you be willing to be a mentor. Everyone needs a mentor. Everyone needs a mentee. No matter how long you've been in the field, you have something to share with others. You will bring your previous experiences and diversity to every role that you have. So think through that. I challenge each and every one of you when you get back to the office to think through who can be my mentor and who can be my mentee. So tips to continue learning. Build a routine. What I mean by that, I'm an early riser. I get up, I do my daily devotion, I get my cup of coffee, and I start studying. I start reviewing something. I prep for something, and then I go to my office. Then I boot up my computer. I get myself into the mindset that I've started my day the way I want to start my day. No matter what's on the other side of that screen, my day is not ruined because I've started my day with a routine. I know how my day is going to start every day. I'm not worried when I turn that screen on that I'm about to have to be a firefighter, or that I'm going to have to fire someone today, or I'm going to have to go do something else. You fill in the blank. Again, blog and journal to help you retain your knowledge. Review trusted news feeds that come in overnight. Set up an RSS feed that comes into your Slack channel that you can review. Set up tabs in your browser so when you launch it and you click it, it loads trusted web news feeds so that you understand. Tailor those to the industry that you work in. Find a podcast or several podcasts to listen to. It allows you to hear a different perspective. Each and every person who's on this stage comes at it from a different lens. So listening to a variety of information gives you a different perspective and allows you to have a paradigm. Because I realized early on that I can see a 6 and you see a 9. Until I switch my perspective, I'm never going to see that 6. So I've learned to continue to look at that paradigm shift, to change my perspective, that I can come at it from the end user's point of view. And dedicate time to study each and every day, 10 to 15 minutes. It could be anything from a virtual flip card or an index. It could be just going and taking simple polls or 5 to 10 questions. Continue to subscribe to information. Yes, you can get information overload. Yes, you can get too much information, but it allows you to have somewhere to go no matter when you get stuck. You know you have a channel for this, you have a feed for that, or you have a friend that you can reach out to on the other side of that keyboard who can help you through it. And lastly on this one, the best way to continue learning is to walk away from your PC. Go outside, ride your bike, go for a run, walk your dog, play golf, disc golf, ultimate. Do something to break the routine so that when you do come back and sit down, you're ready to learn. You're ready to challenge yourself mentally again, because you've done something that's not related to your job, even if it's just for 5 to 10 minutes each and every day. Continue to share what you're learning. Again, I go back to what I said earlier. I will talk to anyone who will listen to me about what I'm passionate about. Continue to pour into the community. Go to your local B-sides. Go to your SANS conferences. Go do a brown bag when you're back in the office, or set up a virtual lunch and learn. When you get home from this trip, go ahead and schedule that. Say, hey team, I want to share one thing I learned this week for the next 5 weeks, and have 5 weeks of sessions that you can share something you learned at this summit this week. And for those of you who are sticking through the course, take that course back on Monday or Tuesday or whenever you go back to the office and share, here's what I learned, and here's how it applies to us. Here's what we can do to change that. And it forces you to continue to evolve because you're always learning and diving into something new. So you've heard me use this phrase a couple times now, the see something, say something mindset. We always use this from an awareness point of view to our end users. But as Blue Team members, as IT professionals ourselves, we are still the front line of defense just like they are. We have to protect our resources and our infrastructure from attacks. They're not always preventable, as we know, but we have to educate and be aware. So that's meaning that when we see something abnormal in our tools and our logs, that we don't scratch our head too long before we escalate or share it with a peer. Because it's easy to say, I can figure this out alone and not say something. So again, this phrase is more pointed towards an end user, but I wanted to highlight the you because you are still an end user in your organization. Even if you wear an IT hat or wear a cybersecurity role, you are still considered an asset to this company. But you need to see something. If you see something, you say something. That's could be anywhere from escalating to your manager, your help desk, the SOC itself, ethics. We don't talk about that much. Compliance. See something, say something. Use your morals, use your values, and use the expertise that you've been given to see something and say something. I like this quote, and with it being October, I wanted to pull in a little bit of awareness towards the end of this presentation. Awareness is good, but without skills and the ability tied to that awareness, all of you will have anxiety. So we've had previous talks, and I continue to think through them. We have to be prepared when, not if. Tabletops, learning, exercising. It allows you to have that awareness. So when it happens, you know how you're going to respond. You've got your BRDCP plan. You've got your CERT plan when the cyber event happens. You've got your evacuation plan, both at home and at work. Practice them. Be aware. Have situational awareness both in your home, since most of that's our office now for a lot of us who are remote, as well as when you're back in your office. Know what you're going to do if something happens and how you're going to respond to it. So continue on with that different flair from the human risk. As a blue teamer, you must understand human risk, not just the human risk. We deal with phishing after it's reported, but we can be phished. We build the cloud, but we use the cloud. We handle data. The point case here, you're investigating something. You pull down a piece of data to your workstation. What are you doing with it when you're done with it? Do you know how to do data hygiene? Are you removing it from your workstation? Did you properly remove it? Did you destroy it? If you physically printed it and brought it into your home office, do you use a clean desk protocol even at home? Do you lock your PC when you get up to go for a break or for a walk or for lunch at your home? You should. If you have an animal, you can do something on your computer, or she can when you're out of the room. If you're like my intern, my 5- and 7-year-old, they like to press buttons when they walk into my office. Got a cat. There's something about the heat of a laptop and a cat who just wants to lay on that keyboard. Physical security. Do you use, I'm from the South. Do I hold the door for someone? Do I ask them for their badge? Do I ask them who they're here to see? I'm a security professional. Do I hold the door for you? Do I press the elevator? Do I badge you into someplace? Because I'm trying to be civil. I'm trying to open the door, trying to be nice. We forget that we are targets just as much as our end users are. Last one, passwords. Not going to spend much on this, but I can probably guess that someone in this room, over half of you are reusing a password somewhere in your environment. You've got a personal password that you're using corporately. You've got a corporate password you're using personally. You can deny it. I know you are, because I do. I'm lazy at times. If it's an ephemeral service, I might use the same password across all of them because I don't care if it gets compromised. I should, because now I'm teaching bad hygiene. When my wife says, what's the password? I tell her so she can plug it into our screen. Then she goes to the next service, what's the password? And I say the same one again. I'm now contradicting what I'm preaching, what I'm telling you. Mobile devices, the more and more prevalent we get with them, the more and more we need to secure them because we're bringing sensitive data down to our devices sometimes unintentionally, because we have email clients on our box and we don't have an MDM to stop us from downloading that attachment that has PI, PHI, PII data in it. Do you know how to report that if it's lost? Do you know how to clean your work? Do you understand how to properly wipe your device to remove data that's on your device? Does it sync to Google Cloud? And now you've made something that's proprietary public, because once it hits the web, it's no longer private anymore. It's not protected. You declassified it because you let it sync to a cloud. We preach this to our end users, but we don't think about it always. We are just as much the human risk as the end user is. A little bit of fishing humor here. What's a hacker's favorite season? Fishing season. Again, we joke, but the hackers out of office also says gone fishing too. So we forget that it's easy to fall prey to things. We get busy. We get complacent. And we, as the blue team member, forget. We knew where we came from. We know where we're going, but we still get busy and we still forget. Last tip for awareness that I'm using, bring security awareness into every meeting you have. It's imperative to introduce security topics to your workforce. During your stand-ups, talk about the latest cyber threat. You're probably doing it anyways, but call it a cyber moment. Encourage your employees to do the same thing in your company. If it's your talent team, give them topics to talk about how to properly manage a PDF if they don't have remote browser isolation, or a container that they can open this PDF in that could be weaponized, because they have to open the PDF. They have to look at the resume. Help them understand that. Your accounts payable, invoices, they have to process it. Talk about that in their meetings. See something, say something, do something. And as I already looked into, if you're aware, you know what you're looking for, you know how to report it, and it can be handled sooner. Because we all know we get alerts, but if our end user tells us, we were told sooner than that alert usually comes into our environment. Because it takes time to process that log, generate the playbook, cut the alert for us to process. So let's recap. No matter your past, you're in control of your future. Build on your past experiences and reflect on what you need to do and do it. Find a mentor and be a mentor. Build a routine that enables you to grow and develop, but at the same time, enjoy the journey. And nobody will have the same journey, so don't compare yourself to others. And my last joke of the day, what is your CISO's two biggest fears? Everyone who works at the company and everyone else who doesn't. And here's where you can find me on Twitter or LinkedIn, and I will continue my dad jokes, both from an IT and meme point of view. Thank you.